Hi, my name is Mike, and welcome to Build It or Buy It, my YouTube channel where I design and build things and make a comparison as to whether that was a better way to go than buying it. If you're new, my first build was this trailer that you can see in the background. In the first two episodes, we started from the raw materials and started getting those cut to length and laid out. And as you can see in the background, we've gotten a little bit farther along. So stay tuned and you'll see how we got this far. If you do like the content you're seeing, please subscribe, like, select the notifications bell. Okay, as you can see, I've got the cross members set in there. They're not in their exact position yet, they're just sitting in there. And let me zoom in here a little bit. They are sitting on just some wood blocks. That gets them up off of the deck and compensates for the wedge shape of the flange there so that they sit level. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go around. I measured out where they land center to center. They're on an 18-inch spacing. So I'm going to mark those off with just a silver line on the top flange of the main frame. And then I'm going to build a small jig that'll hold them at the exact right height and hold them square to the frame. So I'll show you that. So I'm going to get these marked out. On the left side's marked out already. I'm going to mark out the right side. And then I'm going to show you what we're going to do for a jig. Okay, I'll set you up here where you can see, hopefully better, what I'm going to do. So to hold those square to the main frames and to set the height, if you recall, I indicated the trailer's upside down. So the lumber will be on this bottom side. So the lumber will be on this bottom side here. So I'll be using traditional dimensional lumber for the trailer decking. So, which will be 1.5 inches, of course, nominal. But I want that to stick up a little bit higher than the side frame. That way, if, for instance, you needed to sweep debris or dirt or whatever off the trailer, instead of it catching on this lip, the frame lip down here, it will sweep off nicely. So my goal is to have it, so when the dimensional lumber is here, it'll stick above this edge right here by about 1/16 of an inch. So I could cut spacers similar to these spacers. I could cut spacers that were exactly the right dimension, but that then is dependent on how flat that deck is. And the deck on this other trailer I'm using is pretty flat, but still not perfect. So what I'm going to do instead is to let me change your angle here and you can see it a little bit better. The goal is to build a jig or a clamping device that holds the cross member at exactly the correct height, as well as holding it square. So square in this plane. So what I'm going to do is I've just got a couple pieces of scrap angle iron here, which those set nicely on the flange. It also gives me a way to clamp them. Then there will be a small piece of square tube that comes down and spans from this top flange down to the bottom flange. That will be square to this, and then this pin will come off of that square tube, and so that will set the height. So I've got a couple of the pieces cut. I've got the square tubing yet to cut. I do have it set up in the saw, so I'll move you over here so you can see that cut real quick and see the cold saw in action. So got these two little pieces of 1/2-inch square tube. That's how quickly it goes through those. And the cut is Makes a very nice cut on them. There's virtually no burr, no heat. It's cool to the touch. So in my book, that's the only way to go. I'm gonna move you back over here. I'm gonna zip over and I'll be right back. I'm gonna zip over on the belt grinder and touch up the corners a little bit. So the frame itself will work really well for actually setting them up and holding them square, because I can use the frame as my mechanism to clamp them. So I'm just going to set this piece here, clamp it in place. Now the pieces of square tubing, I don't want them to stick down below the bottom of the frame, because then they'd hang up on the trailer. So I'll clamp those on just a little bit shy of touching the trailer deck. And then once I kind of have them lightly clamped, then I can pull them around, check them with the square, and pull them around square. So I'll just put another clamp on here. All right, I'll hold it temporarily. I'm just feeling with my finger just to make sure that I'm above. Just above the bottom of the piece of channel. Check it for square. That's perfectly square with the piece of angle, and then therefore with the top of the channel, so that'll confirm that the cross members will be square to the main frame. I'll put a tack weld on that, and then as I indicated, these small pins, those will go on the piece of square tube at the correct height. So I'm trying to clamp all those pieces in place. It's a little tricky, so I'm going to tack weld this first. I've got to make two of these. One, in essence, one will be a left hand and one will be a right hand that I can clamp on each side. So I'm going to tack this in place first, and that way it'll let me get this bar clamp out of the way, and then I'll set the exact height for the pin. now as you can see on that piece, that'll just let me slide this along wherever there needs to be a cross member. I can line this tube up with the silver marks I made right here, so I'm not trying to have to see the mark on the inside. Okay, so the dimension for where that pin lasts, let me turn the welder off so you don't have to listen to that fan. So this is a 6-inch channel. So the dimension that pin needs to be is, if the channel is 6 inches, the dimensional number is 1.5 inches nominal, and the channel is 3 inches. So I want my lumber to stick about 1/16 of an inch proud of this top edge. So that means I have to come back 1 7/16 of an inch will be the dimension from this surface to the top of this surface. So that makes the pin, the top of the pin that I'm going to put on there, 3 inches plus this remainder. So that remainder would be 1 9/16. So from the top of this channel to the underside of this, the top of the pin needs to be 1 9/16 inches. In essence, since this sits on the top of the channel, we want 1 9/16 from this surface to where the top of the pin is. I'll put a little bit of Sharpie on that so I can make a nice stride mark. Alright, so that mark will show up a little bit better now. Got a little mark there. Write it up with Sharpie. Double check here. Alright, so that one's marked. We'll do the next one here. Make a mirror image of it. Mark where it wasn't really critical where I put that square tube, but just so that they're consistent. Goes on that side of the line. A little on the bottom. Well, that's not good for the square. Okay, we'll tack weld that one. Alright, so Both are marked out at 1 9/16, which when set on here will give us the correct dimension, other than it just dawned on me that I subtracted a 3-inch, which will put the pin at the top, which would work, but that would require me to clamp the cross member to the pin. I want to be able to just set the cross member on there and have the pin support the weight, so I don't have to clamp it. So I actually have to, the 3-inch was added to, not subtracted from. So it's the 1 9/16, and then I have to add the 3. So 4 9/16 is what I actually want the top of the pin to be at. That's why you always double check or when I tack things, so in case you make a mistake, you don't have more to do. I'm going to put an X, just kind of like marking out which side of the line the stud goes on so there's no confusion. And the pins, depending on how square the end is, it can be a little tricky to try to hold this pin square. It doesn't really matter if the pin tips this way, but it definitely matters this way, because if it's not square to this piece, if it tips either this way, it's actually going to hold the channel higher. Or if it tips this way, depending on how tight I have it pulled up, it would also change the height and also try to pull it around out of square. So you either need to check it with square before you tack it down, or the easiest way I've found, if you're doing anything, frankly, and you want it square, if this bottom cut is perfectly square or perpendicular to the surface, then when you can clamp it on with a clamp, and that will hold it perfectly square. So I'm going to run over to the lathe, the metal lathe, and just take a squaring cut on the end of these. I'll bring you along so you can see that operation. But again, it's a tool that not everybody's going to have, and so you certainly could do it without that tool. You could just use a small square when you have it there and tack it on one side, and then bend it, pull it back up if you needed to, and tack the other side. So I'll bring you over here to the lathe. Alright, those should sit nice and straight now. Bring you back over. So now, because those are nice and straight, I can actually clamp down on that pin, and it'll hold it very square. We'll double check it. I need 3 hands here. I'm going to try to hold everything, and instead of clamping it to just this piece itself, I'm just going to use the piece of channel as a place to clamp it to. Open up my vice grips about the right amount. See how close I got. Not very. I'm actually going to switch to, because of this angled edge, it's trying to pull the pin out of square. So let me grab a I'll have to switch to the bar. Do it. That holds that nice and square. Going to double check my dimension. We are exactly at 4 9/16, maybe just a tick. There we go. Now the channel is going to sit on this far side here, so, and it's got a square corner, so I don't want to put any weld in there, otherwise it won't let the channel. Let's see if I have a scrap. The channel got cuts from a cross member, so when I'm putting it together, that'll let me set the piece of channel right in here on the pin like that. So I don't want to have any weld in this corner, otherwise it would not let it sit in there flat. So I'll weld here on the sides. I'll do the sides first, because if I weld on this back edge, the weld's going to try to pull that pin out of square. And if I weld on this side or this side, even if it pulls a little, that axis doesn't matter. So let me turn the welder back on. Frame. Alright, so that pin's in. Check it square. Make sure it didn't pull. Nope, stayed right where it belongs. So there's one done. Again, that'll sit on here. And this side of the way, you can kind of see here, this area here, that channel, it's sitting a little high because of the wood block, but that'll let that sit right down on that pin, and so I can clamp some vice grips here on the top, butt that up tight, put one on each side. That'll perfectly locate each one of the cross members when I tack those in place. And turn the welder off. All right, so those two pieces are built. Again, one's a mirror image, or a left hand and a right hand side. because I want to come in and clamp on this flat side of the channel. So if, just to give you a quick example, and then I'll work on more. I'm going to scoot this piece of channel. I got to scoot the other side. I'm going to scoot those completely out of the way. I'll leave you here for just a sec. And these are still a little on the warm side. Take this one for this side. See my transfer my silver line just around the corner here. Makes it easier to see. So I can put that line right on the right even with that little piece of square tube. Clamp this in place. I'll clamp one on the other side. I'm going to set the cross member up there, and then if I did my math right, double check down to the I don't put my vice grips in the way of where the channel needs to sit. So now I can move the channel over onto that pin and do that on both sides. And I could throw a pair of vice grips up here. One advantage of it is if I clamp this way over to the cross to that piece of square tubing, that will hold it perfectly square. I can also just eyeball down it. So let's take a quick measure of the, have to be careful not to measure the pin itself. So I'm just using the square flat against the top of the channel, and I'll push the blade up so it touches. Tighten it down and see where we're at. And we are exactly 1 7/16 right on the money. So that means that the dimension 1.5 nominal dimension lumber will stick up 1/16 of an inch above this, which was the top of the trailer when it gets flipped over. So the jigs will work out as planned. So it'll be a matter of just going down the line. I do want to, there's a little bit of waviness in these side frames, just because that's what channel does. It's not very strong on this axis till it gets welded up. So I'm going to lay out a little bit of string line, pull things in or push things nice and straight. And I'll bring you back once that's done, because that's just a lot of me walking around the trailer measuring on the string line. So that's not very interesting, and it's pretty straightforward. I'll show it to you before I take the string down and how I go about doing it. But I'm going to get that done, get everything straightened out. I do still have to tack the rear end cap in place before I start, and then I'm just going to tack the cross members. I don't want to weld those fully yet until everything is the corner, the end caps, corners are tacked, all the cross members are tacked, everything's nice and straight. Then I'll start welding things in to try to, so it doesn't pull out of square. So that's where we're at. So I'm gonna cut it off here, and we'll see how much time's in this video. I haven't kept track, so the next episode may be where I pick back up off where I left off today. But if this video isn't too long, or this second session isn't too long, I'll keep going on that. So stay tuned.